church. As is our custom, we always open our service with passing of the peace. So if we would, everyone would please stand and joyfully pass the peace of the Lord. The flowers on the communion table are given to the glory of God by Howard and Kathleen Newton for heartfelt love for our church. Under pastoral concerns, Donald Back is in the Culpeper Health and Rehab Center, so keep him in your prayers, please. Attention any newcomers that may be here today. We would love to connect with you and welcome you to this church. If you might be interested, you can email Chris, you can call the church office, and he'll be glad to get in touch with you. So please remember that. I want to talk a minute about the Pastoral Nominating Committee, the PNC as we call it. The session met with the PNC earlier this week to complete the ministry information form. We call it the MIF. This is basically a job description. There were 13 pages. The PNC did an outstanding job. They worked tirelessly on this for a period of time, and then the session approved it. Now it's being sent to the Presbyterian. And after that, we will be able to start the pastoral search. The PNC actually will go to Richmond. I believe it's Richmond this week to meet with the Presbyterian. It's their second mandatory training session, basically. And they will get further information about how we go through this process. We will then start mapping out our search process, excuse me. We are very grateful to the PNC for all the hard work they have done. And if you see somebody that's on that committee, please be sure to thank them. They've done a lot for this church and for the people in this church. I call your attention to committee meetings in the bulletin, finance, technology, and session meeting in the next few weeks. There's an afternoon circle this week, and also prayer shawl ministry meeting this week. I also want to remind you about our children's church program. This is for 3 to 5-year-olds. They will meet over in the fellowship hall in the nursery area. We'll still have the nursery for those under 3, but then there'll be teachers over there to do a Bible study, to work with these children. It will start at 11 o'clock. So it's different than what we've done before, where the kids would leave in the middle of the service. So it starts at 11. So if you have any children that want to go to this, please make sure they're there at the start, before the start of the worship service. High school, college students, I want to remind you that they're doing a Bible study fellowship at Laurel Gravat's house. This is on Wednesday evenings at 5 o'clock. They will serve dinner. Jenna Lee and Laurel Gravat are both working with the youth on this. Our sanctuary will be open starting in October on Thursday afternoons from 12 until 2 o'clock. We need people to attend this. We'd like to have 2 people at each Thursday session. There's a sign-up sheet in the back in the narthex, or you can call the church office. But we want to have people here, so any of our guests that would come here during that time would have someone to welcome them, and then be able to answer any questions they might have about our church. So this is something new that we're doing. So if you can help out, please sign up in the back today. And let's see, lastly, Lee Turner, who's sitting right there, is working on plays, and she needs cast and crew members beginning probably with the Advent season and then into next year. And she's going to meet with people right after church today in the fellowship hall to be right by the stage. You can go in and start to practice standing up on the stage. I obviously need to practice not touching the microphone. I'm sorry about that. So anyway, if you're available today, did you want to say something? Oh, I might want to come. Yes, right. No, after that, no, probably not. Now I'd like to ask Mort Childs to come up and talk to us for a minute about the Finance Committee.
Sign me up, Lee. Good morning, everyone. As part of our discipleship journey over the past year and a half, we have committed to improved communication and transparency. And in one of those elements, we committed to providing a mid-year financial report to the congregation. This is your mid-year-ish financial report. It's actually timely. We could have perhaps done this in July, but we're actually talking about the elements of what we are committing to as disciples. And Chris will be speaking to communication, transparency, and relationships later in the service. So I'll go ahead and share with you some of the highlights of the financial information. It is in the bulletin insert that you have. First of all, we reached a milestone this past year. We served our 5,000th meal at Manna. That is quite, it's really something to behold. And the really neat part is that we've had new volunteers, not only from the congregation, but the community, join us in this past year to help with that endeavor. We have had outreach to the SAFE ministry, not only in assistance in moving, but providing furniture and financial help. And we have given out over $14,000 to needy recipients from the discretionary fund. So we're alive and well in making a contribution. From a financial standpoint, our operating budget currently each month, our expenditures exceed our receipts, however. I believe you'll see in your bulletin that our monthly expenses are about $32,000 and our monthly receipts are just shy of $30,000. So from a purely operational standpoint, the budget that we traditionally think about to keep the lights on, the doors open, the staff in place, and all of our programs, we're running a deficit on that. The other thing that you need to be aware of, and perhaps you've seen some of the disarray as we go through construction, but we have spent almost $100,000 on refurbishing, repairing, correcting, improving, replacing, use your verb of choice, but HVAC, foundation, lights, lots of things. That $100,000 is from a separate budget, which you can call a reserve fund or a building account, a capital account. Part of that came from the sale of our properties. Part of it came from receipts from estate and legacy giving. So we are blessed to have had those resources to draw upon. I don't think the coming year will be nearly as much in expenditures, but we need to have a program, and we need to have a sense of having to replenish that capital fund. So as we think going forward in terms of what our legacy should be, what our degree of commitment and stewardship should be, then we need to be aware of the totality of all that we do, all that we expend, and all that we need to provide. So as we continue our journey of discipleship, which Chris is in the middle of a 6-week session on that, use this as a backdrop in terms of the financial commitment part of the time, talent, and finances. That is an update. You'll get an end-of-the-year report as well, which perhaps will be more timely for the end of the year than the mid-year was. But in any event, if you have any questions, please feel free to talk with any session members. Anna McFalls, Franklin Tegatani, Pat Martin, myself, are elders on that committee. Pastor Chris and Barb Jenkins are on that committee as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. From the Gospel of John, Jesus said, "Believe in God's light as seen in me, so that you may become children of God's light."
In this hour, may we hear Jesus say, "Follow me. Listen to my word and think about your life as my disciple. Pray, sing, and worship." May we hear him calling, and may we respond with a wholehearted yes. Would you join me in the opening prayer for today? We come as seekers, sometimes unsure of what we seek. We come as followers of Christ, sometimes not fully understanding the one we follow. We come to worship, even though we are so easily distracted. And we come to be changed, though it frightens us, and so we can resist your transformation more than we embrace it. Would you pause for a moment in the quiet and make that prayer, that admission, your own? How do you feel like you seek, but you don't really know what you seek? You want to follow, but you struggle to. You want to worship, but you find it hard to rein in your thoughts, and so forth. Would you pause in the quiet and just admit those things before God Almighty? Holy One, remind us of your unconditional love and meet us where we are. Meet us right here. Meet us right now. This we ask. Amen. Let's stand and sing together about that Jesus who calls to us. Hymn number 87. Let's pause together and pray about our lives as disciples and our mission here to be disciples together. Much of this prayer you find in your bulletin is lifted right out of the Gospel. So it represents the very words and teaching of Jesus on this subject. I'll do my part, and you do yours. God of love, our source of mercy and compassion, weave your dream for the world into the fabric of our lives.
Remove the scales from our eyes and lift the indifference from our hearts, so that we may see your wisdom, a new reign of justice and compassion that will renew the earth.
Transform our lives so that we may accomplish your purposes. Empower us with your Spirit that we might bring good news to the oppressed, bind up the brokenhearted, and proclaim release to those who are captive.
Give us new mercies. Draw us close to you, so that your love might fill us completely, overflowing to
Help us to reach out to those whom no one else will touch or accept, and to care for friends, strangers, and enemies alike. May we heed the call of Jesus to follow him as his disciples. This we earnestly ask. Amen. As we pause to pray for the morning offering, you'll note that my prayer is going to take the shape of being focused on discipleship as well. So let's pray for the morning offering. Father in heaven, it is to the purpose of discipleship that we give this morning. We are not giving to a favorite charity. We are not giving because we feel obligated or pressured. We give instead because we give to something bigger than ourselves. Yes, we give so that we here in the life of this church may be nurtured in our own personal discipleship, but moreover, we give to your work here, wherein every person who attends, child, teen, adult, senior citizen, may grow in their faith and walk more closely with Jesus. We give as disciples toward discipleship. This we ask together. Amen.
We have the splendor of heaven, knowing His destiny. Alone we will walk alone.
remain standing, grab your hymnal, turn to hymn number 631. Let's sing together the Lord's Prayer. Let's pause for a moment and verbalize aloud what it is that we believe about church as a community. These are two stanzas or sections of the PCUSA's Confession of 1967. Again, I'll do my part and you do yours. The new life takes shape in a community in which people know that God loves and accepts them in spite of what they are.
They therefore accept themselves and love others, knowing that no one has any ground on which to stand except God's grace.
The new life finds its direction in the life of Jesus. His deeds and words, his struggle against temptation, his compassion, his anger, and his willingness to suffer death.
The teaching of the apostles and prophets guides men and women in living this life, and the Christian community nurtures and equips them for their ministries.
Our church has been on a journey. It took us 14, 16 months to make it through that first part of the journey. And in that journey, we sensed as a whole that God was calling us in a specific direction. In this case, a very biblical direction for the next era of our church's life. There are a couple of visual cues that will be here in the sanctuary to remind us of that calling and the commitment that we've made to it. Up on the screen is the way that we express that in our mission statement. Our church is called by God to cultivate a community of faithful disciples. And what I want to do in September and early October is I want to work with you through the 6 core values that you created that articulate how you are going to go about this. So last week, if you weren't here, we talked about the first core value, and it has to do with being a church where discipleship is taught. And we spent some time thinking about what it would take of us in order to be a church where teaching is valued. Well, here's the second core value. It reads, discipleship is done together. We will explore ways to help congregants connect and build close relationships with one another as a community of faith. Also, the session staff and congregation will commit to clear and frequent communication on all important matters in the life of the church. You heard Mort reference that earlier. See, he's taking it right from one of our core values. Kudos, Mort. There are 3 sentences that comprise this particular core value. We're going to work through each one of those sentences. The first one is the subject sentence, and the simplest. Discipleship is done together. Here's the first thing I want you to consider. How strongly do you believe in that word together? Or, if you'll allow me to say it another way, how deeply do you think you need each other? Now, here's what I want you to know. The historic Christian faith of the last 2,000 years, in all of its diverse parts, from Roman Catholic to Eastern Orthodox to Reformed to Baptist and on down the line, believe that togetherness, the need of one another, is woven into the very fabric of our faith. You cannot take away togetherness and still have Christianity, in fact. And of course, the scriptures say this as well. Up on the screen is a quote from a pastor who does his work in the United Kingdom. And I chose this particular passage because in 3 short sentences from an article he wrote, you can see what I'm getting at and how deeply this goes into the heart of the Christian faith. Sentence number 1 by Tim Chester. If God were not a Trinity, okay, pause. We as Christians believe that God is 3 persons united in one relationship or as one person. Father, Son, and Spirit. That's what Trinity is. If God were not a Trinity, but merely a solitary divinity, that just is one God, he could neither be love nor be God. That first sentence, many a book has been written on. I could probably preach a sermon on that first sentence. But don't miss how profound it is. That if you take away God's Trinitarian nature, that at the heart of God is not a single being, but a relationship, you no longer have God. And nor, by the way, do you have love. This is something unique to the Christian faith about what we believe about God. And here's why it's important. Next sentence. We, human beings, are made for relationships in the image of that 1 in 3 God. In the same way that I cannot take the Son away from the Father, Son, Spirit, that is the triune God, I cannot take away relationships from you and you still be whole. You need relationships in the same way that the Trinity itself needs all 3 of the persons that comprise it. So therefore, the Christian gospel, or good news, or core message, the Christian gospel and Trinity actually have the same shape. Salvation restores us to who we really are, which is how deeply we are defined by the love we give and receive. So I ask you again to consider, how deeply do you think you need other people? Need is the key word. You know that you need to eat. You know that you need to breathe. You know that you need shelter from the heat or from the cold. From the Christian perspective, you need other people in the very same way. You cannot be whole. You cannot even really be human without that basic need being met. And so now we have to wonder, do we actually live like that? I know that I need to eat. I don't like to miss a meal. I know that I need to sleep. I can tell in my mood and my focus what happens to me if I go a few days without getting a good night's sleep. I bet you're the same way. But do I actually live as if I need relationships as much as I need food or water. And see, when we begin to speak about the inherent, fundamental interdependence of human beings like this, all of a sudden you realize that this part of the Christian message, like some of its other parts, is really countercultural. Because you and I have the notoriety of living within the single most individualistic, autonomous culture that the world has ever seen. So there's a New Testament scholar by the name of Darrell Bock who wrote an article and said, every time this subject comes up, every time we talk about how needfully bound we are to one another, emotionally, spiritually, relationally, American Christians get uncomfortable. Do we live as if we need each other, like food or water? Now, the next sentence in this core value spells out or gives more detail to that opening sentence. We'll explore ways to help congregants connect and build close relationships. Let's explore that. And to do that, I want to introduce you to this. This is a really well-known graph within psychology and sociology. If you Google it, you'll find it really quick. So much so that this is kind of a given. Everybody accepts it. You need to know that leading sociologists in America would tell you that this graph right here, maybe more than any other thing we can say about your life, is going to define how well you live or how poorly you live. This is a graph of the kinds of relationships that we have. And to do this, or to demonstrate this, I need a partner. Tony, I need you to stand right over there by Cheryl. Tony and I know each other. All right. The blue oval. These are the most, these relationships are the ones that you have the most in your life. These require the least work. In fact, they don't require any work at all, really. They're spontaneous. There is no intentionality to them. When a small church like this one says about itself that one of our strengths is we're welcoming, we're warm, and we're friendly, we're meaning in part this circle of relationships. And here's what I mean. I see Tony on a Sunday morning from across the sanctuary. I recognize Tony's face. Maybe I forgot his name. It's okay. It happens. I'm sure that doesn't happen to anybody but me, but I'm freeing you if it happens to you. So we wave at each other because we recognize each other. Tony, wave to me. All right, there you go. Good job. This is the acquaintance level of relationship, and you got plenty of these. Churches are marked by these. Now take a few steps toward me. This is the red oval. This is called the colleague level of great relationships. Think coworkers. Somebody you do something with. So at Rebecca's school, all of those fellow teachers are your colleagues. They fit into the red oval. People here at church that you serve in a ministry with or on a team with, they are at the colleague level. There's just a shared job to do. And again, when small churches say about themselves, we're welcoming, we're warm, and we're friendly, oftentimes what they mean by that, if not the blue oval, is the red oval. We would love for you to come and do our work with us because we don't have enough hands, and we would appreciate having new ones to pitch in. Now, move toward me more. How about the end of that short view right there? Okay? This is the green oval. You have less of these in your life. And now we're beginning to reach the place in your relationships where it takes a little work, takes a little planning. takes a little intentionality. These things don't just happen. Friends are people that you do things with. So you hike with them. You go to the movies with them. You have them to your house to play cards or to have a drink. Think socializing together. But please note that between Tony and I, at this juncture, if we are having a green relationship, there is still a safe, what's called social distance. I only have to show the parts of myself to Tony that I want to. And I can keep hidden from him the parts that I don't. In fact, in relationships like this, there's usually an understanding that we will both only show each other the parts of ourselves that we mutually agree upon. Relationships like this are defined by only being partially known to one another. But then we move to the gold or yellow inner circle, the smallest oval. I told you we know each other. So, at this juncture, we're nose to nose, toe to toe, forehead to forehead. We can read every wrinkle on our foreheads. I can tell that he spent his life outside working on his ranch. And before that, he was beating off mobsters in Long Island, New York. But he'll tell you those stories sometime. I cannot hide when somebody is this close. They see all of me. I am known, and I make myself known when we get to the place where we are intimate with each other. Okay, you can go. I'm done with you. I'm going to keep talking about this. But let's talk about that innermost oval for a moment. What is intimacy like? In the Old Testament, there's a proverb of wise old Solomon that reads this way. Proverbs 18:24 says, "One who has unreliable friends will come quickly to ruin. But there is a kind of friend that sticks closer than family." Yeah, an intimate friend is that kind of friend. Come hell or high water, they will stick closer to you than even your kin. There's a friendship in the Old Testament that we tend to celebrate when we talk about subjects like this. And it's between someone who would become Israel's greatest king and the son of someone, and the son of one of Israel's worst kings, Jonathan and David. This is how their friendship is described in 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 1. The soul of Jonathan was bound to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as much as he loved his own wife. Yeah, that's intimacy. Brene Brown, the well-known sociologist of our day, says this about intimacy. We cultivate intimacy when we allow our most vulnerable and powerful selves to be deeply seen and known. There's a pastor in Houston by the name of Yancey Arrington who has written on this subject, and he says there are 3 characteristics of an intimate friendship. Number 1, an intimate friend has your long-term well-being in mind more than your short-term happiness. Which means these are the people who will tell you what you need to hear, whether or not you need to hear, whether or not you want to hear it. Second trait is they see your secret self. The self that you try to keep hidden even from your own eyes. They see it, and they know it, and they accept you anyway. And the third trait of an intimate friend is that they are very willing to verbalize to you how much you mean to them and how much they love you. It's not guesswork with them. They tell you. And it is at this point that I need to talk to you about the country in which you live. and the subject of intimacy. Several studies have been done recently on American culture in the 21st century that have come to these conclusions about intimacy. The bulk of Americans, the majority of Americans, wish for more intimacy than they experience. Which means that most Americans, yes, I mean you and me too, probably are experiencing an intimacy deficiency in our life. We may have a whole lot of people in the blue and the red, and maybe even a few in the green. But we feel like we don't have enough in the yellow. There's a large minority of Americans, when you ask them, who are you intimate with? Their answer is no one. So they are a mystery to everyone, and in the end they will become a mystery even unto themselves. Moreover, if you are somebody who has an intimacy deficiency in your life, it has the same negative health consequences as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. If you're somebody who has a lack of intimacy in your life, you are 50% more likely to die prematurely. And if all of that isn't stark enough, this last one is. If you have a lack of intimacy in your life with other people, then you share a similar psychology to another group of people. You know who they are? Those persons who are incarcerated and put in solitary confinement. You, my friend, have the same psychology as a prisoner who has been isolated from everybody else. That sounds like human beings need each other to meet. And it sounds like we need each other desperately. And it sounds like most of us have a gap in our lives between how much intimacy we need and how much we actually are getting. Any church that meant what it said when it committed to being disciples together and building close relationships is going to have to build intimacy. Because the truth is, you don't need another friend. You don't need another colleague. But you're dying for intimacy. And so am I. And it doesn't have to be with everybody, but it will be my prayer for your church that every single person who attends here and is committed here will have at least one or two other people with whom they are in relationship and with whom they are committed to building intentionally relational intimacy. Don't settle for anything less. It's funny, after I did this at the 8:30 service, I had several people who were at the 8:30 service catch me across the street at Coffee Fellowship, and they said, in effect, man, you know, when you were talking about it, it started to hurt. Because I live my life trying not to look at how badly I feel like I need other people. But I choose instead to go about my life so fast, so busy, that I just ignore this deep ache that I have inside. Well, to them and to you, I say, why don't we slow down and hear what it is that we all really need. Let's build something intimate here. Mort mentioned that any church that is committed to being disciples together needs to do something else. And we'll just touch on this. You have to be committed to open and clear communication all throughout the church, between the committees and the session and the congregation and the staff and the pastor. As much as confidentiality allows, you have to have what's called organizational transparency, because it builds trust and it builds togetherness. There's a leading group, a consulting group, that does work in America right now for nonprofits, i.e. churches. And this is a partial representation of the checklist that they give nonprofits or churches when they say they want to work on their organizational transparency. If we wanted to take this part of our core values seriously, we would make sure we were implementing these kinds of things. Is there a strategic plan and a set of core values? Is it widely known? And most importantly, does it guide all? How are decisions made? Is it the person with the loudest voice, or the most influence, or the biggest wallet who gets their way? Or is it that set of shared values that we have all agreed on together that will show us what to do, what to decide, and what not to do? Will it be the things that we decided together, or will it be one bully who does? This is organizational transparency. Do leaders seek the input of clients, or in our case, congregants, regularly? Right, we've talked about that. The reason that the last 18 months have been so galvanizing for your church is that you did it together. You weren't told what to do. You were a participant in the process. How can you keep that going forward? Are financial data and board minutes available if confidentially allows? That's why we had Mort do what he did this morning. Here's a fun one. Are difficulties discussed and not obscured or hidden? We love to talk about the successes and the good stuff. But are we willing to talk about the areas of struggle as openly? Are we willing to not hide the ways that we fail or go off course? A transparent organization is comfortable talking about difficulties as openly as successes. And is there regular accountability for all parties in the organization? Do you want to be a group of people who are disciples together? This is part of what it's going to take for you. I want to leave you with a quote. This is from one of the great voices of 21st century American Christianity. She left us far too soon. Her name is Rachel Held Evans. And in this quote, you can hear the call for us to be deeply connected to one another. For us to be different from the culture around us, and yes, in fact, to be the light of the world by being so close to one another. Rachel Held Evans writes, imagine if every church became a place where everyone is safe, but where no one is comfortable. Imagine if every church became a place where we told one another the truth. Then, maybe just then, we would create sanctuary. Would you pray with me? Our Father in heaven, if the 11 o'clock service is anything like the 8:30 service this morning, then at least one thing has happened for some people. That is that our eyes have been opened to how little intimacy we have in our lives. And it hurts. We are starving for it. So let us take seriously the call to do this thing called discipleship together. And in so doing, commit to being purposeful and intentional about the relationships that we form. May we invite one another close, uncomfortably close, so that we might experience love here, like perhaps we have not before. This, Father, we pray, because we are disciples together. Amen. Let's stand and sing together one last time. insert in your bulletin. And namely, I want you to look at number 5. This is something new that we are starting this fall. One of the things that we heard throughout the last 18 months is that you guys want to have the opportunity to be in groups a little more with each other, classes a little more with each other. But that then brought up the next question, which is, well, how do we do that? What's the best way to structure that? And we spent the summer trying to figure that out. We did a few focus groups, especially with our younger families. We also paid attention to the fact that you already have the Lenten dinner rhythm in the life of your church. It's very successful. So from those two things, we created what will be our Disciples Together night. And it's going to happen 3 times in the fall. The first one will be next Sunday at 5 p.m. Then there's one in October and one in November. And we're going to get together on Sunday evening and we're going to share a meal together. And then we're going to do something else together, and it will change from month to month. Sometimes we'll have a couple of classes that you can choose from, and you can go to those classes with one another. Sometimes we're just going to do things as a big group, and we'll do things intergenerationally, where kids and teens and adults and senior citizens all get to mix together. It has the potential to be something really powerful and concrete in our pursuit of being disciples together. Now here's the thing. I can't do this myself. I am one person, and I can only do so much, so we need your help. On the back side of that sheet, it lists all the ways that you can volunteer to help. Would you like to help with the kids sometimes? Would you like to help with meals sometimes? Great. Just let me know. I'm working on the game plan for each one of these nights, and I'll plug it in and let you know how I need to use you. But if you don't mind me saying, if you guys don't get behind this and take responsibility for it, then it's probably not going to go well. So we need you to step up and help as you can. If you have any questions, you can catch me afterward. I look forward to seeing you guys at the first one, which will be next Sunday at 5. I should mention, by the way, that if the subject of building relational intimacy struck a chord with you today, or if you'd like to explore that more, the class that I'm going to teach next Sunday has to do with that. So you guys can come and we'll go a little deeper into how you work on building that into the life of your church. All right, so join me in the closing prayer, and then I'll give you the benediction. God, we know that when Jesus called Simon and Andrew, they dropped their fishing nets and followed him.
When Jesus called James and John, they left their boats and their father's business and followed him.
When Jesus called Matthew, he walked away from his wealth and shame and followed him. Today, we hear Jesus calling us to help us let go, rise up, and follow him. Amen. As you go into the world, follow Jesus. At home with your family, follow Jesus. At school, work, or leisure, follow Jesus. In everything you do and say this week, follow Jesus. And as you do, remember that Jesus is with you always, even